As we know, we have already discussed about philosophy of history. अब हम यहाँ देखेंगे कि हिस्ट्री को जानने के कुछ सोर्सेज होते हैं, जैसे प्राइमरी सोर्सेज एंड सेकेंडरी सोर्सेज. If we talk about primary sources, so primary sources are originally documents or artifacts from the time being studied, such as letters, diaries, photographers, and official reports. They provide direct evidence of history events. For example, Mahatma Gandhi letters and writings are primary sources that provide direct evidence of his thought and action during the Indian independence struggle. Primary sources are very important for historians because they are the direct witness of events and provide the most authentic information. By analyzing these sources, historians and create a more accurate and detailed picture of the past. Now we see secondary sources. Secondary sources are analyzed or interpretation of primary sources. Example include history books, articles, and documentaries that provide context and understanding of historical events. Secondary sources are the result of historians' work and provide a broad perspectives on past events. For instance, a book on the Indians' independence struggle that analyzes various primary sources is a secondary sources. Secondary sources are important for historians because they help understand the various interpretation and perspectives on past events. Now we see oral history. Oral history involves collecting and studying historical information from spoken accounts. It is especially useful for understanding culture and experiences that may not be well documented in written sources. For example, when studying rural life in India, oral history is very important because many events and practices are not well documented in written sources. Oral historians interview local people and record their experience, stories, and memories. This method allows us to hear the voice of people whose stories are often let out the mainstream of history. Now we see historiography. Historiography is the study of how history is written and interpreted. It examines different historians' perspectives, methodology, and the evolution of historical thought. For example, when looking at the history of Indian written in different periods, we find that the perspectives and interpretation of colonial historians during the independence movement, and modern historians can be different. Historiography help us understand that history is not just a compilation of events but also how historians select, present, and interpret events. If we talk about nature of history, the nature of history involves understanding it is a dynamic and interpretive discipline. History is not just about facts, it's about interpreting events and understanding their significance. For instance, the same historical events can be seen the interpreted different by various historians. The nature of history is also that it changes over time as new evidence and perspectives emerge. The interpretation of history is always influenced by the current context and the need and perspectives of society. Thus, history is a constantly involved discipline. History as a science. Some aspects of history are scientific, involving systematic collecting and analysis of data. However, unlike natural science, history also involves subjective interpretation. Historians analyze primary and secondary sources to draw conclusion. They examine and verify evidence, connect facts, and present conclusion. However, like science, history also verify its conclusion through testing and retesting. For example, archaeological evidence and documents are scientifically analyzed to ensure to accuracy of history. History as an art. History is also considered as art because it requires creativity in constructing and narrative past events. Historians must weave together evidence to tell a compelling story. For example, a historian must present information from various sources in a coherent and reliable narratives. This process takes the form of art because it involves choosing, interpreting, and presenting evidence to create a compelling story. Historians must also think about how their stories will impact readers and help them understand and related past events. Objectivity in history. Objectivity in history means striving to present an unbiased account of events while complete objectivity in challenging historians aim to minimize personal biasness in their work. For instance, when studying a historian events, a historian would ensure that they analyze all relevant sources and present their conclusion without bias. Objectivity also means that historians should include their personal perspectives and views in their work minimally. This helps them present a more balanced or accurate picture of events. Subjectivity in history. Subjectivity in history acknowledges that historians' perspective and background can influence their interpretation. Different historians may interpret the same events in various ways. For example, an historian and British historian may have different perspective and interpretation of the events of the Indian independence struggle. Subjectivity also acknowledges that the interpretation of history can change over time with changing society needs and perspectives. Historians must recognize the impact of their personal perspective and appropriately include them in their work. If we talk about scope of history, the scope of history is a vast covering all aspects of human experience, including political, social, economic, cultural, and intellectual history. It span from ancient times to the present. For example, political history include the study of governance system, wars, and leaders, while social history include the study of the lives of ordinary people and the structure of society. Economic history study the development of trade, industry, and economic policies. Cultural history study art, literature, and religious practices, while intellectual history study the development of the ideas and philosophy. The broad scope make the study of history every very rich and diverse. Now we see political history. Political history focus on the study of government, system, political events, leaders, and ideologies. It examines how political power has been required, experience, and challenges. For example, history. Indian political history include the Mughal rule, British colonial period, and past independence politics. Political history also looks at how different ideologies such as democracy, socialism, and communism have shaped society. Furthermore, it studies various political movements and the revolution, such as the French Revolution, American Revolution, and Indian independence struggle. This study helps us understand how political events influence societal development. Now we see social history. Social history explore the lives of ordinary pupils, social structure, and institution. It examines issues such as family life, education, class, and gender rules. For example, the history of the caste system in India, the status of women, and the development of education are parts of social history. Social history also looks at how different social groups and classes have struggled for their rights and freedom. Over time, this study helps us understand how the structures and institutions of society change and how they affect pupils' lives. Economic history. Economic history study the development of economics, trade, industry, and impact of economic policies. It looks at how economic forces have shaped society. For example, studying the Industrial Revolution, which transformed a global economy, for the impact of globalization on today's economy is part of economic history. Economic history also look at how economic policies and trade agreements affect different social classes. Additionally, it study how the distribution of resources and method of production change over time, how these change affect societal development. Cultural history. Cultural history investigate cultural experiences such as art, literature, music, and religion. It explores how cultural practice and belief have evolved over time. For example, the development of Indian literature, the rise of various music genres, and changes in religious practices are parts of cultural history. Cultural history also look at how different cultural changes and interaction have influenced society. This study helps us understand how culture is a vital part of human experience and how it evolves the change over time. Intellectual history. Intellectual history examines the development of ideas, philosophy, and intellectual movements. It looks at how thinkers and their works have influenced societies and historical events. For example, the ideas of thinkers such as Aristotle, Plato, and Confucius and their impact on their society are parts of intellectual history. Additionally, intellectual history look at how scientific discoveries and technology innovation have changed society, ideas and perspectives. This study helps us understand how ideas and knowledge evolve over time and how they contribute to societal development. Microhistory focus on small specific events or individual to gain detailed insight into larger historical phenomena. It often reveals the impact of broader historical force on local levels. For example, by studying the life story of a small village, we can understand how broader social, economic, and political forces affect the local level. Microhistory helps understand broader historical process through individual experience and events. This method helps us understand how history manifests in small, everyday life events beyond just major events and process. Now we see macro history. Macro history look at large scale historical process and trends. It examines long-term pattern and development across civilization and eras. For example, the development of human civilization, major events of different eras, and the study of global history are parts of microhistory. Macrohistory also look at the different civilization influence each other through contact and exchange. This study help us understand how large historical process and trend change over time and how they affect societies and culture. Chronological chronology in history. Chronology is the arrangement of events in their order of occurrence. It helps in understanding the essence and cause and effect relationship between historical events. For example, we look at the chronology of World War II. We can understand how different events are connected and how they affect the outcome of the war. Chronology helps historians study and interpret event in a systematic and logical manner. It also shows us how different events influence each other over time, how they are part of broader historical process. Thematic history. Thematic history focus on specific themes or topics such as war, migration, or technology across different periods and regions. It allows for the deeper understanding of particular issues. For example, we have studied the themes of war. We can examine the causes, process, and impact of war in different eras and culture. Similarly, we study migration. We can see how and why people migrate at different times and places and its impact on societies. Thematic history helps us understand how specific issues and process change over time and place and their broader historical context. Comparative history involves comparing similar events or development in different culture or time periods. It helps identify patterns and difference in historical process. For example, we have compare the agriculture revolution in different society. We can see how and why different society development agriculture and its impact on their society. Comparative history also look at how different society face similar problems and what their solution were. The method this method help us understand how different culture and societies have similarities and difference and how their historical development occurs. Regional history study specific geographical areas such as countries, cities, or religion. For example, studying the history of different states and regions in India is important because each region has its unique history and development. Regional history also looks at how local events and processes are connected to broader national and global events. This study helps us understand how local and regional history is part of the broader historical context and its significance. Now we see world history. World history examines global processes and interaction between different societies. It looks at how civilization have influenced each other through trade conquest and cultural exchange. For example, studying the trade and cultural exchange between Asia and Europe through the Silk Route is part of world history. World history also look at how global conflicts such as World War and global movements such as anti-colonial movements have influenced different societies. This study help us understand how global process and events contribute to the development of various culture and societies. Historical periods. History is often divided into periods such as ancient, medieval, modern to organize and study events systematically. Each period has distinct characteristics and development. For example, in the ancient period, we study ancient civilizations such as Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Harappan civilization. In the medieval period, we study feudalism, religious conflict, and medieval society. In the modern period, we study industrial revolution, colonialism, and rise of the modern national state. The division of historical periods help us better understand and systematically study past events and process. Now we see prehistory. Prehistory refer to the time before written records. It is studied through archaeological, anthropology, and other science that analyze artifacts, fossils, and other physical evidence. For example, studying the tools, painting, and remains of ancient humans in part of prehistory. Prehistory help us understand how human society development and how early human interacted with their environment. This study also show how human society gradually evolved towards agriculture, permanent settlement, and complex society. The study of prehistory provide us with important information about the earlier origin and development of humanity. Ancient history covers early civilizations such as Mesopotamia. If we talk about Mesopotamia, Mesopotamia means अगर हम मेसोपोटामिया की बात करते हैं तो मेसोपोटामिया का हिंदी में अर्थ होता है दो नदियों के बीच का क्षेत्र। जैसे कि दो नदी हैं जिसको हम दजला और फरात कहते हैं, तो उनके बीच के पूरे एरिया को हम मेसोपोटामिया कहते हैं। इसी तरीके से इजिप्ट, ग्रीस एंड रोम, इट एग्जामिन द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ राइटिंग स्टेट एंड मेजर कल्चर एंड टेक्नोलॉजिकल एडवांसमेंट। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, द pyramid of Egypt, the writing system of Mesopotamia, and Greek philosophy are major theme and of ancient history. Ancient history also look at how different civilization interacted and exchanged with each other and how they influence each other. This study helps us understand how early human society laid the foundation of complex and organized societies and how their achievement contribute to the development of modern civilization. Now we see medieval history. Medieval history span roughly through the 5th and 15th century. It includes a study of feudalism, the rise of church, crusade, and formation of early nation state. For example, the feudal system in Europe, the crusade and medieval religious conflict are part of medieval history. Medieval history also look at how society developed their social, political, and economic structure and how they faced their challenges. This study help us understand how medieval society laid the foundation of modern nation state and institution and how their development influenced modern history. Modern history being around the 16th century and includes the Renaissance, Enlightenment, industrialization, and major political revolution. It examines the development of modern world. For example, the rise of Renaissance in Europe, the scientific revolution, and the industrial revolution are part of modern history. Modern history also look at how colonialism, World War, and independence movement shaped modern nation, state, and international relations. This study helped us understand how modern societies and institutions develop and how they influence the present global scenario. Now we see contemporary history. Contemporary history refer to the study of recent events, typically from the 20th century to the present. It cover major global conflict, technology, advancement, and ongoing social changes. For example, the First and Second World War are Cold War and globalization are parts of the contemporary history. Contemporary history also looks at how modern society have faced and adapt to technology, innovation, social movement, and political changes. This study helps us understand how current events and processes are part of the broader historical context and how they will influence the future. Now we see sources of history. Historical sources include written documents, oral documents, physical artifacts, and visual material. These sources are used to construct and interpret past events. For example, artifacts obtained from archaeological excavation, historical documents such as government record and personal letter, and photograph and drawing are the import source of historians. By analyzing these source, historian can create an accurate and detailed picture of the past. The use of historical sources ensure that the study of history is accurate, true, authentic, and help us better understand past event and process. Archives and libraries are essential for preserving historical documents and records. They provide valuable resources for researchers and historians to study and analyze the past. For example, documents and books stored in national archive and libraries provide important information to historians. These institutions collect or preserve historical documents, letters, photographs, and other materials that are the essential for study of history. Archive and libraries also provide a necessary tools and facilities for the historical research, making the study and analyze the history more effective. Now we see museums and monuments. Museums and monuments preserve the display artifacts and objects of historical significance. They play a crucial role in educating the public about history and heritage. For example, Nation Museum, war memorials, and historic sites provide important information about past events and individual museums and monuments. Not only display historical artifacts but also educate the public about history through educational program, exhibition, and lecture. This helps us understand and respect our culture heritage. Digital history. Digital history use technology to study and present historical information online, archives, database, and virtual have made history more accessible to a broader audience. For example, digitalization of historical documents of digital platform and online museum tours have made of the study of history more accessible and engaging. Digital history l- also look at how technology innovation have transformed historical research and teaching. Additionally, digital history has provided researchers with more data and tools, allowing them to conduct more accurate and detailed study. The study of digital history help us understand how technology has changed the study of presentation of history and how it may continue to evolve the future. Historical interpretation involves analyzing audience and forming narratives about the past. The different historians may interpret the same events differently based on their perspective and methodologies. For example, the events of the Indian independence struggle can be interpreted the different ways by different historians. Historical interpretation also looks at how different source and evidence are combined to create a coherent narrative. This process can vary based on the analytical skill and perspective of historians. The study of historical interpretation help us understand how past events are understood and presented and how different perspectives and methodologies influence the interpretation of history. Debates in history. History often involves debates and different viewpoints. Historian may disagree an interpretation, cause of events, and the significance of historical developments. For example, different historians may present different interpretation of the causes of consequence of World War First and Second. Database debates in history also look at how different societies and culture remember the interrupt past events. This study help us understand how different perspectives and wise influence the interpretation of history, and how debate and disagreement are integral part of historical study. The study of debates in history help us understand how different perspective and methodology influence the interpretation and presentation of historical events. Now we see ethical issues in history. Ethical issues in history include the responsibility to accurately present the past, the respect for cultural accurately represent the past, respect the cultural heritage, and the ethic use the historical evidence. Historians must negative these challenges carefully. For example, when study historical events, historians must ensure that they present their conclusion accurately and impartially. Ethical issues also look at how historians need to minimize personal and cultural bias in their research. Additionally, historians must ensure that they respect and preserve culture and historical heritage in their work. The study of ethical issues in history help us understand how historians' ethical responsibility and impact of their work influence historical study and presentation. Now we see the future of history. The future of history involves embracing new technology, methodology, and perspective. It includes the ongoing effort of make history relevant and engaging for future generation. For example, digital history and online platform are transforming the study and presentation of history. In the future, historians and researchers will use new technologies such as artificial intelligence and big data to analyze and interpret historians' evidence. Additionally, the future of history look at how historians will expand their work in include perspective and experiences of various scientists and cultures. The future of history help us understand how innovation and change are important in the study and presentation of history, and how they can continue to evolve in the future. Conclusion: the study of history is vital for understanding our past, present, and future. It enriches our knowledge, foster critical thinking, and help us navigate the complexity of the modern world. Studying history teaches us how past events and process influence the present and how they will shape the future. The study helps us understand our society, roots, achievement, and challenges. Studying history also teaches us how different society and culture have evolved the changed over time, and how they have learned and exchanged with each other. In conclusion, studying history is not just about understanding the past, but also about helping us better understand and manage present and future. Thank you. होप आपको अच्छा लगा होगा, और इसी तरीके के वीडियो हम अपलोड करते रहेंगे।